Welcome to the next podcast from Millinery.Info. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie, and thank you so much for joining me today for this episode. In this series, we get to welcome milliners from across the globe into your ears and studio. In this episode, we hear from Andrea Cainero, who is the designer and milliner behind the label Somewhere Here. Andrea won the Millinery Australia Design Award in 2023, but I'll let her tell you more about this piece later in the podcast. Thank you to our wonderful podcast sponsors for their support of this series: Hatlocks Australia, Louise McDonald Milliner, House of Adorn, The Hat Magazine, Hatters Millinery Supplies, Lifted Millinery, Be Unique Millinery, Judith M. Millinery Supply House, Hats by Lego, Hat Academy, and Millinery Australia. You can find a link to each of these businesses in our show notes. That's either in the podcast app or through our website. I hope you've been enjoying this podcast series. I absolutely love bringing you these conversations with our industry leaders. I hope you find them inspiring and that you might pick up something for your own business or for your millinery skills. If this is the case, I'd like to invite you to become a Patreon supporter. There's a tier that's just $5 a month. It's called A Little Thank You to Millinery.Info, which helps me to keep making this podcast and bringing you what I think is great content, and I hope you agree. Head over to patreon.com/millinery.info to sign up or to find out more. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Andrea. Thank you so much for joining me for today's podcast, Andrea. It's fantastic to have you as part of the podcast series. We're going to start with your latest award-winning hat from the Millinery Australia Design Award this year. Congratulations on the win. And could you tell us a little bit about the piece?
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here with you today. So my piece, obviously the theme for the award was ruffled. And so I wanted to focus on ruffles as they are. There's all sorts of different interpretations of it, but I thought, what is a ruffle from the sense of fashion? So I looked back through some historical references of ruffles and remembered a piece that I had done in collaboration with a girlfriend of mine, Carla Spedic, who's an Australian designer, and thought, well, I could do something with that that sort of focused on historical and cultural headpieces, and did a bit of research around sort of the 1600s and ruffles, headpieces. What did they look like and what could I do? And came up with something. I wanted it a little bit more elevated than what I had done previously, and came up with the idea to add in some tambour beading because that's so quick to produce, and created a piece that I was really proud of, and I thought was a really good representation of my skills and my training and things like that as well.
So exciting, and it had such gorgeous elements to it. Is the beading element, because that was quite a hero of it in the contrasting red, is that some skills you've used before, or were you learning that skill for just this piece?
No, I had done some training in tambour beading with Karen Teresi a few years ago. So I started my, I guess, fashion creative career when I was 17, working for a local bridal designer in Sydney called Villani by Nikki. And so I always had a love of glamorous evening wear, I guess, and learnt some really great skills with her with lace work and beading. And then we had worked with Karen when she used to live in Australia, and then she moved overseas to the UK to explore her career as a beader and embroiderer over there. So she works for a lot of the collections in Paris for the couture collections, and had come back to do some training up in Brisbane at one of the conventions up there. So Nikki and I went up and did a 2-day workshop with her, and then I went on to do that was the beginner level, and then I went on to do the level 1 and level 2 with her as well when she was out in Sydney, and picked up a few skills of how to attach the beads and things like that, and just really enjoyed the process. It's when you start learning tambour, because you're using a hook and not a traditional needle, it can be quite frustrating, and there's lots of holes that you put into the fabric. Strategically use organza so that you can see what your hands are doing underneath, because they're feeding the bead up and hooking the thread around the hook, and then you've got to twist and pull up through the fabric to create a chain stitch. But I find it's quite a meditative kind of a process in a weird way. So it was a little bit of my mental therapy, I think, working on it. But I just enjoyed sort of being in the zone of it and getting through with the design that I came up with as well.
Do you know what it was going to look like when you began?
I did. I did have a sketch of this one. Often I don't do sketches as part of my process. I kind of research and gather all the images and then have an idea in my head. But I had actually sketched something this time. But it was all in different components. So I had to block the base of it. And then once that was done, then I had the ruffles, I guess, that were created. And then I had the piece of organza on the frame while I was doing the embroidery. So it was sort of happening in 3 different stages. And I was just hoping that it all came together the way that I wanted and worked together. So thankfully it did, because you can't take the embroidery off to check it until it's finished, because it all has to be stretched. Tambour means like the drum, so it has to be stretched as tight as a drum. And so once you take it off, it is what it is. So there was no process really of checking it until it was ready to go. But yeah, I managed to pull it all together, and it did come out as I had envisaged. Thank goodness, because it was like right up towards the deadline, and I didn't have a backup plan. So
Of course not. I think we rarely do in those scenarios, but that must be
no.
such a skill, because the blocking would have been dimensional and the fabric would have been a flat surface. There's lots of variables to come together in that.
Yeah, and I worked with Cinema on the block, so I have had a bit of a love-hate relationship with Cinema. I remember when I first started working with it, I loved the capabilities of it, but I think I'm drawn to Cinema because of my background with fashion and working with fabric. It's very similar in that way, and the way you can manipulate it. Obviously a bit different to fabric, because you can create more shape with it. But the way that the bias works using grains and things like that. So that all was kind of part of the whole concept as well, and a lot about, manipulating fabric and embellishing for this one.
And back to the beginning, you have a very long-standing career in the fashion industry alone, but if we just go to your millinery career, when did you first begin in this part of the industry?
I am relatively new to millinery, so I started in, I think it was 2019. So I had come back to work. I had my son in 2017, and I went back to work mid 2018. And we had a few staff movements, and we had another head teacher come and join us in 2019 who worked at the design centre at Enmore. So I'm head teacher for fashion design studio at TAFE New South Wales in Ultimo. So we're within the same skills team, but on different campuses. And we were just talking about, I don't know, our backgrounds and what we had done with work and costume and things like that. And I'd mentioned something about always wanting to learn millinery. It was something I always wanted to do, but just had never done. And she mentioned that they were running short courses over at Enmore with a fabulous teacher who's Penny Gervais. And so they were doing these evening short courses, and she said, I'm thinking of doing it next term. And I said, oh, well, I'll do that with you as well. So I enrolled into a short course, and I think we got one done, must have been term 4 in 2019, maybe a little bit earlier, but I think it was just the term 4. And then I started a second one at the beginning of 2020. And that one obviously got interrupted then with the lockdown. But I sort of was then able to go on and do a lot of the training sort of flipped and pivoted to online training and things like that. I joined the Millinery Association at that point as well, because I'd won MIMSI in 2020 and won a membership to the Millinery Association. And yeah, I think I don't think I would have had the courage to join quite so soon had that not happened. So it all sort of worked out quite nicely for me, I guess.
But you're a very skilled maker before that, so I guess the transfer of skills was, new materials, but your making and your knowledge of textiles and fashion is quite deep, and you've got a vast experience before you came to millinery. What's been some of the fun things you've got to do in your career before that point?
Yeah, so I think one thing I always say to our students here is, like you go and do some training and you get taught a set of skills, and then it's sort of the world is your oyster, and it depends what you do with those skills and how you use them. So I've got training in fashion design and have worked in the industry in both sort of production and design. And after sort of having my own small label for a little while and deciding I didn't want to be financially struggling that much, I sort of gave that up and fell into doing some costume design and styling, working in advertising and in the music industry. So the first job that I worked on was a music video for Sneaky Sound System for Kansas City. So I was originally just dressing the sort of marionette puppets that were the replicas of the members of the band of Damon, Angus, and Connie. And then that progressed into dressing the band for it as well and doing a 2-day shoot for that. And then I sort of met through contacts that I had from there. A girlfriend of mine that was executive producing introduced me to Josh Logue, who had just done a music video for Empire of the Sun, and it was their first single for Walking on a Dream. And I remember when I looked it up, because I was like, I don't know who Empire of the Sun is. I'm the person who all these amazing music opportunities were wasted on because I don't know the names of all the artists and things like that. But I remember when I looked it up on YouTube, I remember hearing the song when I was driving in the car one day on the radio, and I actually pulled the car over to type the name of it into my phone so that I would remember that song. And the video was so bright and colorful. I really wanted to be involved in that project. So I paid for my own ticket to fly to Mexico, and we shot for about 3 or 4 days in Mexico at the end of October in 2008. We were over there in a little town in the north of Mexico for like the Day of the Dead festival, which was really cool. And there was some amazing locations that we went to. And I had no idea what I was doing. And I was completely exhausted, and it felt very rogue and very out of my depth. But the good thing was, I think I was so tired, I just didn't have the energy to overthink it and really ran with it. And we created this amazing music video. And then I went on to work with them as their costume designer and stylist for 5 years after that. So I got to make all the costumes for the band, for the dancers, travel around doing all the live shows, and had some really, really incredible experiences and opportunities through that. I just wish I had my millinery skills back then, because as a
Imagine the
milliner
hats
now,
you could have got on their head.
I know. And you imagine what I made. I was very creative with what I made the hats out of. And thankfully, they were sort of stage costumes and nothing that was being interrogated as millinery is for the design award, because I would not have won anything with my skills back then. But yeah, it was a really incredible project to work on.
Cool. And along the journey there, you've also joined the TAFE in Sydney, as you mentioned. How did that come about?
So I actually did my training at TAFE, and I did a 2-year diploma in apparel manufacturing, it was called back then. Then went and worked in the industry for Lisa Ho for 12 months, and then came back to study fashion design. So I was a student at where I work now. And after graduating and working, starting my own label, they called me back to come in and do some part-time teaching. So I started off just part-time teaching, one night class, and it sort of just built from there. And that sort of happened at the same time as I then stopped my label, was just teaching, moved into the styling part of things, and then I think in 2009, I started full-time teaching. So I was very much juggling the whole traveling around. Empire of the Sun had started touring internationally in 2010. So it was sort of quite a juggle of work here and then the industry work as well. But it's something, you know, I feel very proud to work here. We're one of the top fashion schools in Australia, and we've got an international reputation. And, I absolutely loved being a student here. And the industry connections we have. I studied with Romance Was Born. We're in my year, and Dion Lee's one of our graduates. So we've got a really strong alumni, and a sort of have been the backbone of the Australian fashion industry in Sydney a lot too. And really proud of what we do here and how we give people an opportunity to realise their creative dreams, I guess, as well. So yeah, a little bit part of the furniture here. I've been here for quite a while now. So
And then you just dove into millinery as well.
and then I thought, well, I'm not doing much else. I've only got young children, a full-time job, and I want to do this little side hustle. So so yeah, I sort of had the opportunity to always wanted to get back into a creative outlet after I stopped touring. And yeah, it's a bit hard to juggle it all with kids. I've got a 6-year-old and a 3-year-old, so that gets a bit challenging at times. But it's something that I get to do for myself. So with my job and home, you sort of feel like you're running around and serving other people all the time. So to have some time to sit and do something creative for myself really does a lot for, I guess, my mental health, as well as all those personal things that you get out of it.
Amazing. And you kind of dove into, I guess I say the scene, that's not quite the right term, but the industry with your piece that you created for Mimsy. And we'll include a photo of that with we launched the podcast. But for those who might have not heard about that piece, could you tell us about what the theme was and what you created for it? If you can take your mind back.
Yes. So I was a very last minute entry into that because I had just had Harper, my now almost 4-year-old. And I remember when I started millinery, sort of following the different competitions and groups and things like that. And I remember seeing Mimsy. And then I think the theme that year was From Waste to Wow. And I thought, oh, that'd be good to enter. And then I thought, oh, I don't have time to do that. And then, I don't know, I kind of came up with an idea of doing some upcycling an old hat. I have so many things. We always talk about the stash of supplies that we've collected, not hoarded, but collected over the many years. And mine come from the fashion background, the costume background. Now there's a whole millinery collection as well. So I thought, I came up with an idea, and I think it was 2 weeks before the due date. And I thought, oh, I was on maternity leave, and I thought, oh, yeah, I think I can get that done. So I just went for it. And being new to millinery, I sort of thought, oh, I'll enter, and it'll be interesting to see how I stack up against everyone else. And never in my wildest dreams did I ever expect to win that competition. So I remember I wasn't able to be down in Melbourne because I had a 12-week-old baby and a 2.5-year-old, and my partner was overseas in the US for 12 days. And so I remember when I saw that I had won, I messaged my family. I'm like, oh my God, I won. And they said, what did you win? I said, I have no idea, but I won. Like it was very exciting. I couldn't believe it. So, but yeah, I used an upcycled felt hat. I think I had some old jewelry pieces that were kind of made out of like these gold, or not real gold, obviously, but like huge bobby pins, and created this other piece. I wanted to add some texture in there as well, and so used some fly screen that we had around the house, and then some cable ties as well. So I think the millinery wire and a bit of Petersham ribbon was sort of the new things, and everything else was already existing. So yeah, it was a cool piece.
Yeah, very nice. And you speak about your stash. We've all got a stash of some variety and some scale, some bigger than others, not confessing there. Where does your stash live? Where's your workroom?
Oh, well, as my partner would say, my stash lives all over our house. So I used to have a workroom when I had my label and was a student and doing costume. I worked out of my grandmother's garage, and when she passed away, I had to move most of it into storage because I only had a one-bedroom apartment. And then when we had Sam, we moved into a house, and so the storage stuff got put into a little shed out the back, which is now in the garage. But I also do have a room, which is supposed to be my millinery room, but the stash has kind of become a little bit overwhelming in there. So my studio is now in my wardrobe / COVID home office upstairs, and the stash is downstairs. So, but my partner thinks that our house is a little bit like a hat museum with hat blocks and stands and things like that in almost every room. But it's just a creative space. So yeah. But definitely, I'm a home studio person. I'd love to have an outside studio, but at the moment, I think the other thing that worked for me with getting into millinery with the kids was constantly being interrupted by young children. Millinery is something that you can do a little bit here and a little bit there, and then eventually, a few weeks later, you get a hat made. I am a bit faster than that now, but yeah, it was something that I was able to manage. While being at home with the kids as well. So the dream is to eventually have my own space when the kids don't have to be there with me, but not quite up to that yet.
Not quite yet. And do you develop a collection each year, or how has your making process been recently?
Yeah, I try to do a collection. It sort of happens more for spring and is more of a capsule collection for me. I guess the time always gets away from the ideas. So the creative process of coming up with the concepts is always there and all the ideas. And then I find that I don't even get through making half of those. But thankfully it's sort of interrupted with some collaborations with different stylists and things like that, which I really enjoy. I really enjoy collaborating with other creatives. So I find that process also inspires me and then will send me off on another little tangent. So yeah, it's a little bit looser, I guess, than having a whole collection. But yeah, it kind of works for me at the moment. So it's often there's a piece that's made and then it kind of spurs on a few other sort of variations of things, or I see something, I get inspired. Obviously, I look at fashion and trends and things like that every day for work. So I'm inspired a lot by clothing and fashion. So I find that the ideas, I'm always thinking, how can I interpret that into a hat, or how would that work? Might be colors, the color palette that I get inspired by, or some imagery that's not fashion related as well. So yeah, it kind of comes from all different places, I guess.
Cool. And those collaborations you mentioned, are they something that you've been knowing how much they stimulate your creative side? Are they something that you really actively pursue, or it's just been time in the industry that it's falling to you quite naturally?
Yeah, I think it's been the time there. There is an aspect of sort of putting yourself out there, so letting people know what you do and where you are. But then, yeah, for me, I guess I'm around stylists a lot. I'm sort of involved in fashion events through work and things like that too. So it has, I guess, come quite naturally or evolved uh, quite smoothly for me, based on what I've done and the background of my work prior to getting into millinery as well, and industry connections that I've had there
Over the
too. So
years.
yeah, yeah.
And how did you, when you first came to cinema, you spoke about the bias of cinema before. We have some unusual materials which we use that are kind of, I say, exclusive to the industry, probably. How
Yeah.
have you found finding a whole range of new materials under your fingers and working with them?
Well, there's a whole new collection going on in my house now. So, I think again, it's the time is I remember someone asked me sort of, what's your biggest challenge with millinery? And for me, it's the time. So, to see the materials, and the collection comes from when you go, oh my God, I would love to make something with that. And you buy that and you don't have the time to make something with that. Or I'm the one that goes, oh, I don't want to waste that on that. I'll get that for that. And then I'll get another one so that, I have
'Cause
two of things. Yes, in case I stuff that up, I want to still have that because that's amazing. So yeah, they are new materials. It's interesting. For one of my hat timber entries for the wearable art, I actually used the felt hood that we got to block a bodice. So it's sort of merged, I guess, the fashion and the millinery there again as well. And it's interesting to see how the materials that are traditionally millinery materials can come and play into fashion as well. So I think we've got one of our final year students this year using millinery wire to create some sort of caged pieces that are really sculptural and things like that. So the techniques, I think, really do cross over. But I have never used buntal straw in fashion. So they definitely are more exclusive to some materials that are really exclusive to millinery. And it's been really exciting to explore. And I don't think I've fully explored them all yet. But I look forward to doing that again when there's more time to play with things. Yes. Yeah.
And you mentioned the hat timber. You are quite the, I say, competition entrant. What do you love so much about the challenge of a competition?
Um, I when the first couple of years I really did enter a lot of competitions. Now because I'm sort of working on collections and the business has built more, I don't do as much competition work. But I think what's really great about competitions is that they give you the opportunity to have a starting point for something. So whether it's with hat timber and you get given, the curated materials and you have to come up with an idea about that, or there's a theme and a prompt for that. I love also sort of being involved with fellow milliners as well, and everyone kind of working on their own ideas. I love seeing the different interpretations of a theme and hearing about what the concepts are behind the hats. I think gives you a better understanding of the hats that are produced as well, and a better appreciation for the work. But I think the opportunity to collaborate even with your peers within the industry with competition work, and you always do something that kind of pushes beyond what your skills are. So it's an opportunity to challenge yourself, and there's a deadline on it. So you have to get it done by a certain point in time that's being set by somebody else as well. But yeah, it's that opportunity to be challenged and then to have your work showcased as well. And the platforms that some of these competitions have helps you to broaden your reach, I guess, with your brand as well. And I think that's really beneficial to building your business too.
There's something about an external deadline that really gets the creative juices flowing, isn't there?
It is. It's the that my procrastination creative process of second guessing myself continuously, even when you've got the idea. And through the Millinery Award piece, the design award piece, I did second guess myself through that as well. So, but I stuck back to the concept that I initially had, which was, I think, why it turned out as strong as it did. But yeah, when there's that deadline and you can procrastinate around when you've got all the time, and then when there's no time, you just have to make those decisions. And the ability to make those quick decisions then is quite astounding when you've been not able to do that for the 3 weeks leading up to it. So, but I think it's very common for a lot of creatives to be in that process. And those outside the creative process are like, why are you always doing everything last minute and staying up, for 3 days the night before? It is what it is. It's when I do my best work. So yeah.
Blessing but a curse.
Yes, definitely.
And what have been some career highlights so far for you?
Uh for millinery or broader?
We can take a mixture.
Yeah. So I think for millinery, the winning the design award, definitely a career highlight. and winning MIMSI as well, because I think that really sort of gave me the confidence that yes, this is something you could really do something with, and gave me the confidence to sort of pursue a business in millinery. Obviously my work with Empire of the Sun, and we played a lot of really cool music festivals, and I've had my work on, different international TV shows and the ARIA Awards and things like that. So that was a huge career and life highlight for me. When I had my label, I showed my collection at Australian Fashion Week. So that was pretty amazing as well. But with millinery, there's still a lot more I guess I want to achieve and places I want to go with that. So what's been nice about having the different sort of areas of my career, I guess, is that each one has its own set of opportunities. And it's really inspiring to have this new sort of part of my career that, there's a whole other avenue to go down now as well.
And being in the teaching mentoring space, it's a bit of a cliche question, but do you have any tips or guidance you like to give to those that are thinking about entering the creative industry or fashion industry?
Yeah, I think you have to be prepared to work really hard, to have sleepless nights. It is a reality of your work in the industry. I think, the skill is to learn to be able to put yourself out there and put your work out there. Uh, and you never stop learning. I think you never stop learning. When I started teaching, I think I became a stronger designer because I learned from the students' creative process. I always say I'm very lucky that I get to, go to work every day and be surrounded by, 100 creative people. It can be quite interesting at times, but you're always around that creative energy, and not many people get to do that. And you get, in life or in the opportunity to learn creatively, you do get taught a set of skills. And then I think it's about looking at that as a set of skills, and then looking at how you can apply it to where you want to go, and be open to opportunities, because you never know where an opportunity might take you. I think I've been fortunate, but I've been in the right place at the right time. But then I worked my ass off, if I can say that, to yes, to
You
to get
certainly have.
to make the most of those opportunities, and more opportunities came because of the work that I did. So there is a part of it that is a little bit about who you know, in terms of having those doors open for you, but it's about what you do once you step into that room, and how you show what you do that really allows another door to open, and and I guess the adventure to continue as well.
So true. And what's a project you're working on that you're looking forward to sharing, or what's coming up for you?
At the moment, I'm currently working on my VRC piece. So I often, when I enter competitions, I'm a little bit quiet about it, because I think, oh, I don't know, I've in the past been a bit self-conscious, so that you go, I don't want to say that I'm entering that in case I don't do so well with it, and I just won't show it. But I kind of
And I
feel like
decide
I've
not to post it in the
yeah.
rest of the world.
Yeah, exactly. But I think I've sort of moved beyond that personal barrier for myself. So yes, I am working on my piece for the Melbourne Cup, the Lily and Frank Millinery Award. So I'm excited to see what that one looks like, because that's one I don't have a sketch of, but have a concept that's already kind of diverged a little bit into something else. But yeah, challenge again, sort of keeping true to some of my signature skills in there, but then seeing how else I can push that a little bit as well.
That's so exciting. Well, we can't wait to see what you create. You've wowed us with each of your competition entries in a different way so far. So it'll be very cool to see what comes out this
No
time.
pressure now, is there?
No
So
pressure, sorry.
just put it out there to the world. Oh dear.
It has been so fantastic to chat hats with you, Andrea. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Millinery.Info with Andrea. A shout out to our wonderful podcast sponsors for their support: Hat Academy, Millinery Australia, Hatters Millinery Supplies, House for Dawn, Judith M. Millinery Supply House, Hats by Lego, Be Unique Millinery, Lifted Millinery, Louise McDonald Milliner, The Hat Magazine, and Hat Blocks Australia. You can find a link to each of these businesses in our show notes. That's either in the podcast app which you're listening through or on our website. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon of Millinery.Info and supporting this series, please head over to www.patreon.com/Millinery.Info. There's a few ways that you can show your support for this series, and we thank each of you for the opportunity. I'm your host, Lauren Ritchie, and thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Millinery.Info. I look forward to talking hats with you again soon.